So talking today about adolescence, Erikson stages of psychosocial development, middle adulthood, and old age. So adolescence, what is it? Adolescence is the period of life from puberty until adulthood. So puberty marks the age at which a person becomes capable of sexual reproduction. So just because you are capable of sexual reproduction does not mean that you should be having children, though, right? Most people hit puberty between about the ages of 11 to about 15. That's a typical age range. So in puberty then, the timing of puberty depends on genetic and environmental factors. So for example, in young women, body fat triggers the hormonal changes because the female body needs to have a certain percentage of body fat to be able to carry a child to full term. The timing of puberty, though, can have some consequences. So boys who are early maturers, so this means boys who hit puberty before the majority of their peers, some consequences include a more positive view of their body, likely because their body is becoming more lean and muscular. And this can also relate to improved performance in athletics based on this new muscular body. Also, though, boys who are early maturing are more likely to smoke, to binge drink, and also to break the law. And this is likely due to the fact that early maturing boys are probably hanging out with older crowds, and the older people that they're hanging out with might be encouraging them to engage in these dangerous behaviors. With early maturing girls, there are consequences as well. So for girls who reach puberty prior to the majority of their peers, oftentimes they are very socially popular, but they're also viewed by the peer group as sexually active, even if they are not sexually active. There are some other consequences as well, such as more fighting with parents. They're more likely to drop out of school and more likely to have a negative body image. So in terms of more likely to fight with parents, this is probably a result of these early maturing girls who want more freedom. They want to be able to do the things that older girls are able to do, and their parents still see them perhaps as young, even though they might have a body that makes them look much older than they are. More likely to have negative body image also. So as girls mature, they start to develop fat deposits on the body, right? So girls start to develop breasts, they start to develop wider hips as a result of going through puberty. And so if these girls, subscribe to the dominant thinness ideal as what's beautiful and acceptable for women, going through puberty actually moves them farther away from this thinness ideal. And so as a result, then these girls might be very uncomfortable or unhappy with their bodies. Okay, so let's talk about Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And Erikson's theory really revolutionized the field of developmental psychology because he was among the first to focus on development as this process over the entire lifetime. So he outlined 8 stages that we go through over the course of the lifetime, and he also accounted for things that are important in each stage of life, particularly things like work and family and love and things like that. So in Erikson's 8 stages, in each stage he has 2 opposite ends of a continuum, so 2 anchor points. So for example, in stage 1, trust is one end of the continuum and mistrust is at the other end of the continuum. The individual, as you develop, you need to resolve the crisis. There is some kind of psychological challenge that exists in each of these stages, a crisis that needs to be resolved before moving on to the next stage. So Erikson believed then that your experiences in each of these stages will determine how you resolve these particular challenges. So in stage 1, we have basic trust versus mistrust. This is infancy until about age 1, and Erikson believed that your resolution of this stage depends on if you can trust that someone will be there to provide for your needs. So if you have someone who feeds you when you're hungry, who changes your diaper regularly, who shows you love and affection, you're more likely to develop trust in this stage. And then if you do not have those experiences, you're more likely to develop mistrust. Additionally, Erikson believed that the way that you resolve these crises can impact your functioning later on down the line. So let's say that you develop mistrust in stage 1. You fall more towards that end of the continuum. Erikson believed that this might surface later on in your adult relationships, where you have a very difficult time perhaps trusting people later on down the line. Okay, so stage 2, we have autonomy versus shame and doubt. So autonomy then means freedom, and children in this particular stage are just starting to kind of break away from their primary attachment figure. So this could be mom, dad, caregiver, and they're starting to explore the environment. Erikson believed that if these children are encouraged to kind of go out there, check things out, then they are more likely to develop on the autonomy end of the spectrum. If, however, they're shamed for their particular desire to individuate themselves, to differentiate themselves from the primary attachment figure, they're likely to develop this sense of shame and doubt in their abilities to be autonomous, to be an independent person. Stage 3, preschool stage, initiative versus guilt. In this stage, again, children are starting to do things for themselves, right? They're starting to take that sense of initiative. And Erikson believed if they're allowed to take that sense of initiative, they'll develop on the initiative end of the continuum. If, however, they're made to feel guilty for wanting to do things on their own, and also for the particular wants and desires that they have during this stage, if they're made to feel guilty about them, then they'll develop more on the guilt end. Stage 4, during elementary school, competence versus inferiority. In elementary school, children start to compare themselves to other children. And if children start to compare themselves to other kids and they feel grossly inferior, like they are never as good as someone else in the class, they will never be as good as their peers, they develop more on this inferiority end. If, however, they carve out their niche, they determine the particular skill set that they really, really have a good hold on, then they are more likely to develop on the competence end. Stage 5, during adolescence, identity versus role confusion. So in this stage, Erikson believed that adolescents are really trying to figure out who they are, right? They're trying to establish an identity. And if they, by the end of this period, determine, who they are as a person, they've developed a strong sense of identity. Or they might still be confused about who they are. They might not really have a firm understanding of themselves as people. They'll develop more on the role confusion end. Stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. During young adulthood, Erikson believed the central task is to find some kind of intimate partner. And this doesn't have to be sexual intimacy. It can be intimacy in terms of friendship, intimacy in terms of your relationship with your child. But you need to find someone to share that kind of intimate relationship with, or you will experience this isolation where you don't have these meaningful connections. Stage 7, generativity versus stagnation. Erikson believed that during middle adulthood, the central task is to be able to give back. That's this idea of generativity, to be able to use your talents, your knowledge, your skill set to help the younger generation. If you are not interested in this generativity process, then you are likely to fall on the stagnation end, and stagnation basically means that you're standing still. You are not using your talents, your knowledge to help younger generations. And then finally, stage 8, late adulthood, we have ego integrity versus ego despair. And Erikson believed that in this stage, you're looking back on your life, looking back on the things that have happened that you have accomplished. And if you look back and you're satisfied with the way that things have gone in your life, you'll have this sense of ego integrity. However, if you look back and you have a lot of regrets, you're very unhappy with the way things turned out, you will have this sense of ego despair. And again, Erikson's stages on the whole, his theory, very important to developmental psychology because he looked at the lifespan, right, from birth until old age, talking about the central developmental tasks, and also that he accounted for things like your work life and your personal life as important influences in development. So let's move on then to other stages in life, looking at a stage called emerging adulthood. This is a relatively new stage that developmental psychologists have outlined. And it's basically this idea that in some ways you're still an adolescent and in some ways you're an adult. But you're not completely an adolescent, but you're not completely an adult either. So many of you, especially if you're a traditional college student, are probably in this emerging adulthood phase where, you know, in some ways you're an adult. So maybe you're responsible for paying some of your bills. You're responsible for keeping your home tidy in order. But in some ways you're not quite an adult. You know, maybe you call your parents when you need advice about something. Maybe you still take your laundry to your mom's house to do laundry. Maybe your parents still pay some of your bills for you. And in the middle years, this is perceived by many as the prime of life. So middle adulthood, viewed as the prime of life because during this particular stage, most people have established themselves in some kind of professional career. They're probably making pretty decent money. They've established intimate relationships. They might have children. And so this is the period of life where, you know, you are the one who's in the driver's seat, right? You are the one who is really, really directing how your life unfolds. So this is a survey asking individuals if they are an adult yet, okay? And so you can see here at the bottom that we have different ages, different age ranges, and if these individuals said yes, no, or yes and no. And so you can see between the 18 and 25, demonstrating this concept of emerging adulthood, that yes and no. You're kind of an adult, but not 100% an adult. But good thing for the respondents to this questionnaire that as they get older, 36 to 55, most people are saying, yes, I am an adult. I'm a little concerned, though, about the ones who still say yes and no, and the ones who say definitely not. Okay, so let's talk about old age. So this is the final stage in life. And with old age, there seems to be this stereotype that thinking or your cognitive capabilities deplete very, very rapidly, very, very quickly. However, that's not really the case. So if we look at different types of intelligence or different types of thinking, we have fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. With fluid intelligence, this is your capacity to apply deductive reasoning and to use new information to solve problems. So this is an ability that is not really dependent on your level of education, okay? So this is like how quickly you can process information, apply that new information to solving problems. And this type of intelligence, this fluid intelligence, does decline in old age. We have crystallized intelligence, though, and these are your cognitive skills, and this is basically your specific knowledge base that you've amassed over your lifetime. And it's very, very much related to education, okay? So you can think of when something is crystallized, that means that it's built up, right? It's hardened. So this is the knowledge that you have built up or hardened and stored over your lifetime. And crystallized intelligence doesn't decline with old age. So, in looking at this stereotype that as we enter into old age, we are definitely going to become senile, oftentimes this senility or this, kind of fogginess, this apparent inability to process information quickly, oftentimes that can be a result of the many medications that many of the elderly are actually taking. Additionally, think about, depression. Oftentimes, individuals experience depression as they enter into old age, and this can be a result of a loss of meaningful activity. So maybe they have lost their physical capability to engage in the things that they used to enjoy. Maybe they're not working the same jobs that they had before, and so there's a loss of intellectual stimulation, and also just control over events. So it's possible that physically you can't make the decisions for yourself that maybe you once were able to make. And so you have maybe your children making those decisions for you, and losing, control over what you once had can definitely lead to depression. However, there is a particular theory of aging called the activity theory of aging that states that if individuals can maintain a level of activity, particularly a level of activity that was similar to what they had earlier in life, they'll maintain a high degree of life satisfaction. So just because you're entering into old age doesn't mean you have to necessarily give up on the things that you did before that you found meaningful or enjoyable. Another thing to take into account here with the depression is that as you enter into old age, you might be losing a lot of the people who are important to you. So this could mean the death of a spouse, perhaps death of your friends around you, and so that can contribute to the experience of depression as well.